Kathy looked lovingly at her small collection of Christmas sweaters as she wondered what the dress code actually was for a chilly ice arena. Not wanting to be underdressed, she opted for the navy and cream sweater dress that Quinn had given her on a whim back in October. Pairing it with snowflake earrings, she felt both comfortable and stylish when Richard knocked on the door.
"You look nice."
Richard smiled as Kathy stepped aside so he could come inside and out of the cold.
"Same to you,"
she replied back.
"The tie's a nice touch." "You don't think it's too much, do you?" "No."
Richard looked down at the snowman embellished silk.
"I've got a more normal one in the car." "I think it's great,"
Kathy said genuinely and pointed to her earrings.
"We kind of match."
Her friend's eyes lit up when he saw the little golden snowflakes.
"I gave you those about 2 Christmases ago." "That's right, you did, didn't you? You've got good taste, Rich. I wear them all the time."
His smile widened.
"I'm glad." "Where's your friend?"
Kathy asked, knitting her brow as she looked over Richard's shoulder and found just empty space. Richard's smile faded a little into embarrassment.
"Oh, that's right. I forgot to tell you,"
he said quickly.
"Marco called in and said he'd been called in for a last-minute costume check or something, so he'll have to meet up with us after the show. I figured we could all go for coffee then. Is that okay?"
"Sure," Kathy said, then put a hand to her stomach.
"We can still get dinner first, though, right?"
Richard chuckled, albeit sheepishly.
"Yes, of course we can. I wasn't going to deny you food. That's probably why I forgot to mention the change." "Don't worry about it."
Kathy grabbed her purse from the hall table.
"As long as we eat, I'm happy."
Richard smiled, less embarrassed now.
"I take that means you're ready to go?"
"It does indeed."
"Might want to grab your coat then."
They both smiled as Kathy donned her coat. She quickly grabbed a scarf before following Richard out to the parking lot and locked the door behind her. The memory of the absent-minded jogger flashed in her thoughts as she turned her key, and she let out a grateful breath that Hrax didn't appear to know where she lived.
"Everything okay?"
Richard questioned, noticing her fiddle with the key.
"All good,"
Kathy stated satisfactorily.
"Just hungry, I guess."
"Well, I made reservations, so that can be remedied fairly soon." Richard smiled brightly and led the way to the car. Kathy took another conscious breath as she got in the passenger seat. She then closed the car door, blocking out the cold and the stress. She had been looking forward to this evening for weeks, and not even Lawrence Hrax was going to ruin it. Adam walked through the silent halls of the lair, eyeballing all the equipment and pondering everything now that he was back. He walked up to the glass case containing a dark blue suit, the Kevlar-padded mantle he'd left behind, or more accurately, abandoned in his nanobot-fueled crusade for power. He placed his hand on the glass, his head lining up with the mask in the translucent reflection. Night Shadow had gathered it from his room and placed it there. He wondered, did they think he was gone for good? He sure wasn't sure then. He still wasn't completely sure now. Things were awkward internally for him. Ulfric's suit had done things to him. It had twisted him, turned him into a different person, one that he wished to forget, but was cursed to remember. It was really crushing his pride. He looked at the training room, then back to his suit. The arena buzzed with voices as happy audience members bustled their way out of their seats after the show. Richard had gone to find his friend near the stage, which left Kathy to contentedly wander back outside to wait. All the performers had done a wonderful job. She wondered how difficult it was to skate so effortlessly on ice while wearing some of the more bulky costumes. "Kathy?" Turning around, Kathy was pleasantly surprised to see Detective Engelman smiling at her.
"Oh, hi, Scott,"
she said with a big grin.
"I wasn't expecting to see you here. Do you like ballet?"
"I like this ballet. I guess it's the sword fight and the fact that there's a whole song dedicated to chocolate." They both laughed. "It reminds me of Christmases back home, too." He continued.
"How so?"
"It was my mom's favorite. She always had the soundtrack playing in the kitchen while she made these incredibly elaborate gingerbread houses."
"That sounds like a wonderful time."
Kathy told him.
My mom and I gave gingerbread houses several attempts when I was younger, but they always turned out just as inedible as they looked.
Detective Engelman let out a hearty chuckle, and Kathy noticed how his eyes sparkled in his mirror.
I'm sure they weren't all that bad.
Oh, they were,
Kathy promised.
I might have to prove it to you sometime. I'm sure we still have photos.
I'd love to see them.
He smiled.
Kathy, I've been meaning to ask.
Kathy, there you are.
Scott's words were muffled by Richard's unintentional interruption. She waved him over and turned back to Scott.
What were you saying?
The sudden appearance of Richard and the man who accompanied him appeared to have derailed the detective's train of thought.
It's nothing,
he managed.
I should probably get going anyway. I'm working the late shift tonight.
Oh, well, it was nice to see you.
It was good to see you too, Kathy.
He looked to the newcomers.
You all have a nice evening.
Same to you,
Richard said out of politeness before regaining Kathy's attention.
This is my friend I told you about,
he said excitedly.
Didn't he do a great job?
Kathy smiled at the handsome stranger, but was at a loss for words. Thankfully, he broke the ice.
You probably don't recognize me without the ears and the crown,
he said, and extended his hand.
I'm Marco, when I'm not a rat.
She shook his hand.
I'm Kathy,
she said, then added,
You skate beautifully. It can't be easy in that costume.
Thanks. You get used to it,
he assured her.
And speaking of beautiful, those earrings are lovely.
Thank you. These were actually Richie's doing. I've had them for years. They go with everything.
Kathy wasn't sure why she'd given so much detail about her earrings, but Marco didn't seem to mind. He smiled approvingly at Richard.
This guy has good taste. We're lucky to know him.
I totally agree.
Richard was clearly delighted to see his two friends properly introduced.
Marco suggested trying out that new coffee shop a few blocks over. Sound good to you?
Sure.
Kathy smiled, not entirely sure who she wanted to make eye contact with at the moment.
Great.
Marco flashed a handsome smile.
It isn't far. Are we all good with walking?
Everyone agreed walking was a good idea, and they began the short march to the town square. Kathy's pace slowed a bit from her company as she found herself enjoying the brisk night air and even more so the gentle snowfall. It must have started snowing during her conversation with Scott, but she hadn't fully noticed it until now. A hearty chuckle sent her attention back to the two men in front of her. It had been Marco's laughter. Something Richard said was obviously quite funny. It had been Marco's laughter. Apparently something Richard had said was quite funny. Looking at them both filled Kathy's heart with a sudden happiness. She sometimes worried about Richard's ability to forge good, long-standing friendships. Being the mayor's son, he often attracted people who intended to use his kind and trusting personality as a ladder up in the city or general politics. But Marco seemed different. He hadn't said one word about politics, opting to talk about the performance, and at this point in the walk was actively engaged in Richard's favorite office party fiasco story.
Oh, here it is,
Marco said, catching his laughter just long enough to identify their destination.
Great,
Richard said, opening the door.
Let's get out of this cold.
Ladies first,
Marco said, gesturing for Kathy to go into the warm cafe ahead of him. She nodded her thanks and quickly stepped through the open door. After ordering at the counter, the three of them chose a small table near the window.
I didn't expect snow tonight,
Richard said absently as he sipped his coffee. Kathy smiled approvingly.
It's really coming down now,
she said.
It was still pretty light on the way here.
Maybe by the time we leave, someone will have built a snowman in the park,
Marco chimed in happily, glancing toward the opposite side of the street, where the distant lights of the nearby park were barely visible.
It's possible,
Kathy commented, mostly to her hot chocolate, which was sadly too hot to drink.
Yeah,
Richard frowned.
But I'll have to wait until morning to find out. The walk here was fine, but I don't think I have it in me to trudge all the way to the park tonight.
Marco gave a slight laugh.
I forget sometimes you're not as used to the cold as I am, Richie.
Kathy fought back a laugh as Richard gave an uncharacteristically witty retort. She smiled as she turned her focus from the window to the two friends across the table. Looking at Marco closely for the first time, She began to realize just how handsome he was. His bright eyes and styled hair were a welcome yet stark contrast from the gaudy and over-the-top Rat King from his earlier performance. She smiled to herself as he and Richard exchanged laughs.
Looks like Richie's finally found a decent friend,
she thought, remembering with an ache the many times a friend had been used for his influence only to be dropped like a burnt hot pocket after the so-called friend got what they'd wanted from him.
"So, Kathy,"
Marco said, whisking her out of her thoughts and back into the conversation.
"We seem to be dominating the convo here. Sorry about that. It's so hard to get this guy all to myself. He stays busy."
"No worries. I'm just enjoying my drink."
Marco smiled.
"Rich tells me you've been friends since you were kids. Got any embarrassing stories you want to share about this guy?"
Kathy smiled and looked at Richard, whose face was steadily growing a nice shade of pink.
"I've got a few,"
she chuckled,
"but I'm not sure you're ready."
Richard regained his normal complexion and smiled gratefully. The conversation turned away from poking fun and became more relaxed as the evening went on. Marco was an easy conversationalist, and Kathy found herself wanting to know him better.
"Oh, man,"
Richard said after a while.
"Looks like they're about to kick us out."
He nodded toward the door where a barista was flipping the sign from open to closed.
"I didn't realize how late it had gotten,"
Kathy said, feeling a bit guilty for staying so long.
"I guess it's a wrap then,"
Marco said, halfway standing.
"If you guys don't mind, my place is in the opposite direction of the arena, so I may just leave my car and walk a few blocks home."
"Fine by me if you're sure you won't freeze,"
Richard answered as he gathered his trash from the table.
"I'll be fine. I like the cold, remember?"
"Well,"
Kathy said upon exiting the cafe,
"that was a good way to spend a snowy night. It was nice meeting you, Marco."
Marco smiled brightly.
"Same to you, Kathy."
He hesitated.
"I look forward to our next meeting."
Whether Kathy's cheeks felt a slight burn from the cold or from blushing was unclear, but she wasn't given the time to ponder because Richard was eager to return to the car and start the heater. The walk back to the car was uneventful. Kathy wondered silently if there really was a snowman in the park by now, as Marco had suggested, while keeping pace with Richard as he walked briskly, hands stuffed into his pockets.
"Thanks for coming tonight,"
Richard said once back at Kathy's apartment. He watched her dig for her house keys.
"I think Marco really liked meeting you." "He seemed nice,"
she said absently as the key search continued.
"Yeah, he's a pretty cool guy." "I'm glad you met."
Kathy triumphantly revealed her key and positioned it in the lock.
"You are?"
"Yeah."
"How so?"
Kathy opened the door.
It's nice to see you have a friend who doesn't want anything from you."
Richard let out a breath he'd accidentally been holding.
"Oh, yeah. You're always looking out for me, aren't you?"
"You're my best friend, Rich. Of course I'm looking out for you."
"Right."
Richard ran a hand through his hair.
"Hey, you're my best friend, too. I'll see you soon."
"Have a good night,"
Kathy said, stepping into the warm foyer.
"See you later."